Hello guys, Sir Grandelot here. I now have a bit over 100 hours in the last Epoch, and I spent most of them on this character, my Runemaster. I've been enjoying it a lot. I still believe that this is one of the best hack and slash games that have been released in a very, very long time. And it took me a bit to find a build that I'm enjoying playing, that is also performing pretty well, and I wanted to share it with you. Now, these are the stats that I currently have. I focused a lot on resistances during the last few weeks because as I was reaching a higher difficulty in monoliths, I was struggling a little bit with getting one shot every now and then. And I have a few defensive layers, like the ability of avoiding critical strike, generating a lot of ward. I invested a bit in armor just to reduce the incoming damage. And in general, my build is a Hydra build. Now, first I want to show you which skills I picked for the Runemaster, Mage and Sorcerer. I think there isn't a lot of room for experimenting here, because in the mage line we do not want to waste too many skill points, because the really juicy stuff is somewhere else. And yeah, one could remove, these 2 points in Scholar and put them somewhere else for more damage, but the difference is really minimal. Just Arcanist, Mage Flurry, Knowledge of Destruction are extremely valuable considering the amount of points that they need to perform well, and the remaining 2 can be used pretty much whenever. I invested 15 points in the Sorcerer passive skill tree because I reached the point where mana regeneration is the thing that makes my build the most survivable. And this will be even more clear when I show the skills that I'm using and the rotation and all that sort of stuff. So I decided to invest quite a few points here to increase, well, of course intelligence, but flat mana, as well as having a huge boost in mana regeneration. In the Runemaster skill tree, I unlocked these nodes at the top left and center, which I believe are ideal for probably 90% Runemaster builds, just because they give some damage as well as survivability and mana regeneration. And then got this point, this skill, for the same reason. Extra health regen is not particularly amazing, but a lot of mana regeneration. Here we got, some extra damage and some nodes that overall improve, ward, mana regeneration, damage output. One single point here, because it doesn't scale particularly well. So having one single point invested for 20% chance of a rune war buff to become active is pretty good. 4 points here. 7 points here, pretty standard stuff, I believe. And when it comes to the skills, it's worth mentioning that this is not how I started my character. I've always played it as a Runemaster, but in the beginning I was playing Fireball as my main damage dealing ability. The main reason is that within the first few levels, basically within the first 2 or 3 days of play, I got a Cinder Song, which increases the fire damage in general, but especially it makes Fireball Omega Busted. And this allowed my Fireball to carry me through a huge chunk of the game. Eventually I decided to switch to Hydra, just because it covers a huge AoE with little to no downtime, and it has been performing extremely well for me so far, as I'm clearing Empower monoliths of higher and higher difficulties. The highest that I'm clearing is currently just above 400, which is not a lot, but for the most part they feel incredibly easy, and I believe it will take very little effort for me to go well above that. Runebolt is a fairly new addition, because I used to have Fireball here that I was casting as a damage ability while the Hydra was on cooldown. But because all the defensive layers in my build rely on quite a large chunk of mana, like Flame Ward, Flame Rush, and the Frost Wall, which is now Lightning, and I decided to ditch completely Fireball and rely on Runebolt, because Runebolt has a lot of ways to be cheaper and help regenerate more mana, as well as giving me a little bit of extra sustain, because when I cast Runebolt and I hit something I regenerate some extra health. 75 is not a lot, but my character only has about 1600 health. So it's not an insignificant amount. And I invested 1 point in each of his nodes, and their only purpose is to make sure that the rune bolt that I cast will always be fire. The reason for that, let's move to the runic invocation for a moment. I'm using immutable order, meaning that as long as the skills that are here are lightning, fire, fire, I will always cast a Hydra without having to worry about the order of things. In a perfect world, I would have a lightning ability here, like I would always be able to cast a rune bolt as a lightning ability and have a fire, like flame ward here and flame dash here. But the world is not a right and perfect and just place, and I find this way more reliable. Like, sure, I had to waste a couple of skill points here and 4 skill points here, but overall it feels way, way, way better. Now, going back to Runic Invocation, basically all the nodes that I got improve its damage output. I decided to put 4 full points here, the chance to summon a double Hydra. Just because when it happens, it's so amazing, it's so insanely good that I'm willing to, let's say, run the risk of overcapping the chance. But I just want to see the Hydra, or the double Hydra, because especially against bosses where you need to spend a bit of time dodging and avoiding incoming damage, having an almost guaranteed Hydra when you summon it, when you have time, it's absolutely fantastic. Flame Ward, pretty much everything that reduces incoming damage, as well as generating extra ward, very simple build. Sorry about that. Frost Wall, a couple of points here to turn it into lightning, and it stays here because the first rune to summon a Hydra has to be lightning. Pretty much everything else is just there to generate extra ward, reduce incoming damage, making it cheaper, casting Flame Ward when I pass through it, you know, just extra defensive layers. And Flame Rush, the most important node is by far this one, Epilogue, which means that I can cast Runic Invocation without putting it on cooldown every time that I dash around. And it's extremely convenient because unfortunately this node on Runic Invocation puts a long cooldown on the Hydra, which is not particularly amazing. But by doing this, it means that you can cast Runic Invocation a couple of times through Flame Rush, even when it's on cooldown. Talking about equipment, this is pretty much mandatory. It just makes the Hydra so much better. And I've recently started to use a Fundamental Criterion because the extra scaling from attunement is fantastic. +3 Runic Invocation is great. This one got a decent thing when it comes to the legendary crafting potential. The 52% increase of spell crit, which doubles, was a nice thing to drop on this chest. And in terms of defense, it gives a nice amount of armor, and mana spent gained as ward is absolutely great. And something that has been helping a lot recently is this belt. Particularly for the skill that is specific of the belts that drop from exiled mages. 1.4 seconds of traversal skill cooldown recovered on potion use means that if I use a potion, at the moment I do not have any, but the moment I use a potion, it reduces the cooldown by basically half, because it's a flat reduction, not a percent reduction. So the moment I use Flame Rush, if I use 2 potions, I can use Flame Rush again, which is great not only for summoning Hydras, but also for survivability. And I got this font of Erased many levels ago, and it has been extremely hard for me to replace it, because it rolled a high amount of increased elemental damage, 14 intelligence. And so even though 11 necrotic resistance and the block chance are not particularly amazing, like block chance does nothing for me. 11 necrotic resistance is not that much, but it even got a nice roll of 9% increased health and mana. The mana spent again as ward is close to the max, so I'm finding it very hard to drop a ring with stats that are better than this one. Ideally, I would find pieces that allow me extra scaling for attunement. That's why I'm building intelligence and attunement on as many pieces as I can, but some stuff will be very difficult to replace. And I have a very good helmet. You know, I will be hunting mostly for a better amulet, better offhand catalyst, better gloves, we can do better than this, and some better idols. Idols, by the way, I will show them one by one. I put as many hit points and ward attention as I could. Then I picked a couple of these that gives me extra ward, extra fire damage. If I could get another one of these with extra ward when I cast flame ward and extra damage, I would gladly replace this one, because I value extra ward quite a lot. And here we have, you know, whatever and whatever. These last two are not particularly amazing, but they're the best that I have available right now. Let's put back the Cinder here in a random tab. My bank is an absolute mess. Let's clear a couple of Empowered Monoliths to see what the build looks like. Here I will fight a Shade of Ouroboros, so that I can reset the timeline and start farming again. This is the timeline where I can get the Hydra Relic. The one that I have now is not bad in terms of rolls and everything, but there is always room for improvement. Bunch of Hydra. It's pretty much melting. Although my equipment is not that amazing, the damage output is pretty relevant. And it's also a build that allows me to be fairly safe, because it's dealing damage even when I'm moving, because the Hydra is just staying there, spitting knowledge, effects and truth, and it just dunks on most enemies without particular issues. We can pick them up. It can be useful for characters that I'm leveling up. I'm working on a druid called Doggies, and unfortunately the build that he has now does not even summon Doggies. It's a little bit disappointing. We're just a bit above 400 corruption. I have a few timelines above 400 corruption, because I'm not focusing on one specifically. For my mental sanity, I like to, you know, farm a timeline for a day or two, then move to a different one, then move to a different one. Just for variety's sake. Okay. And the idea is always try to cast a shield wall, a rune bolt, flame dash, firewall, rune bolt, shield dash. You know, it's difficult for me to remember the names of things. Because it's a wall that for me, for a very long time, was a firewall. Now it's no longer a firewall, it's a lightning wall. So it's a frost wall that used to be firewall for a very long time, and now it's a lightning wall. You can understand, I think, why my brain refuses to take part of that nonsense. And if you're using Flame Dash to cast a Hydra, you only need to cast 2 spells, because the first one generating the last rune is going to be Flame Dash itself. But if you want to manually cast the Hydra, it's important to do something like the wall, rune bolt, and then we can cast the Hydra manually. GG, that one is done. It's always better to do it via Flame Rush, but because Flame Rush does not put the runic invocation itself on cooldown, when there is a target like an elite enemy, a boss or whatever, you know, something that you really want to focus target to kill, being able to do Flame Rush to drop a Hydra, and then you manually cast your runic invocation, and then you do another Flame Rush to cast another Hydra, you're pretty much melting everything that is in front of you while moving around. Here, of course, I hit a wall, because life is not thy job, but what can you do about it? It's nice every now and then, when you notice that it's available to cast Flame Ward, just to get the extra ward. Survivability of this build that I'm using is not particularly problematic. The only times during which I need to be very careful are when I'm fighting a boss like the Ouroboros Shade, or, you know, the timeline boss, and the amount of modifiers that it has is a little bit obnoxious. In those cases I need to be extra careful. What did we get here? A piece of garbage? Yes. As expected, as expected. There are not many uniques that I'm looking forward to grind for this build. A better Criterion would be nice, better Hydra would be nice, but other than that, everything else can be just filled with exalted pieces. What do we got here? A shield. And now that I'm using this build, I have a loot filter that gives me pretty much only things with both intelligence and attunement, or exalted pieces that have mage modifiers, mage bonuses, skill bonuses and stuff like that, that, you know, through a little bit of crafting could lead to some interesting results. Here I manually cast a Hydra, then a rush, couple of potions, but it's already done. Checkmate Sir Grandalor for trying to do things properly. And when I see uniques with a bit of legendary potential, I always pick them up just because they can be occasionally be useful. Maybe not necessarily for this character, but for other characters, future projects, stuff that I want to level up. Let's see if we got anything interesting here. Not really. Let's keep going. Clear another monolith very quickly. What I tend to do recently is I try to go far from the center to start to build, you know, the timeline thing faster, then move around a bit to find nodes that I'm interested in, and then eventually, when there is nothing more of interest, I look for the shade of Ouroboros and I reset the timeline. I'm not particularly focused on, you know, meta building corruption. I just do it a little bit at a time on different timelines. In one timeline I'm farming for the chest, in one timeline I'm farming for the Hydra, and there is also a pair of boots, the dragon boots, that I used for some time, then they got power crept for my build. But if I got a pair of those dragon boots with good substats and legendary potential, crafting potential, that could still be extremely valuable for me. For the regular nodes, you know, like these kinds of nodes, I don't even need to look at the mods. I just need to pay attention to it when I'm getting closer to a boss, and I will have a look. And if it's something like, oh, plus 200% elemental damage, then I will look for some easy node, or, you know, whatever will allow me to drop a bit the most obnoxious modifiers, just to make my life a little bit easier. My damage went up significantly when I started to use the Hyper Criterion, whatever it's called, the chest piece, thanks to the double scaling. The fact that now that I scale with the true stats, and that even attunement provides a multiplier to the damage, was a huge deal for this build. I will seal the void gate and then we'll be done. Right now my mana regeneration is very good, meaning that I can very safely just keep spamming my skills. Until a few days ago, before I respect some abilities and eventually got a ton of mana regeneration, it was very easy for me to go a bit too low on mana, and that's problematic because casting a shield, a flame ward, going through the shield and doing this again over and over and over generates a huge amount of ward over time, and it gives you a lot of sustain, but you need to be able to also sustain the mana cost of it. And with enough mana regeneration it becomes pretty easy, but you don't want your mana to go too low, otherwise it becomes a little bit problematic. You end up being not really a sitting duck because you're always moving with this build, but you're basically a duck that is walking in circle with no ward, no hit points, and you're just praying to the RNG gods that no enemy will one-shot you. And as we go back to town to see what we got here, probably a piece of garbage here, extra pieces of garbage. This one, No, this one is awful. That will be done. That will be all for me for now. This was just a quick update to show the progress for my character. Doing pretty okay. Doing pretty okay. Still looking for some upgrades. But in my spare time, every now and then, I also enjoy leveling up my druid doggies, because this character really feels very, very strong. Bye guys, and wish you a happy grind. Take care.